All right, and what's your name?
My name is Jennie Dutton.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1978.
Okay. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in West Virginia in a town called Bridgeport.
What was your favorite sorts of experiences that you had as a kid?
We did a lot of traveling when I was a child. We did camping trips everywhere. We camped up through Canada. We camped all the way across the United States over to Seattle and down California coast. A lot of camping in my childhood.
That's great. And getting to the point here, we ask you to come and speak with us about your experiences with the 9/11 tragedy. Could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about that?
At the time, I was working in the University Library System in Pittsburgh, at the University of Pittsburgh. And on that day, I was at work and started work at a really early hour. It seems like 7:30. And so we didn't know anything about it until patrons and university staff started coming in and saying, you need to watch TV, you need to look online. And so immediately we looked online. And at that time, a lot of websites had shut down and crashed, news sources especially, because of the increase in traffic. And then we had one of our staff members call in whose father worked at the Pentagon. And he was calling off for the rest of the week because they couldn't find his dad. So,
how did it, so after you had found out about it, I know that didn't end all of the disruptions to the day. How did the rest of it go?
Well, essentially, we had to evacuate the buildings, and they were closing down the university for the day. We all had to get home, and many staff members relied on public transit, buses, things like that in Pittsburgh, and they completely shut down that system with no warning. And so many people were stuck inside the city, and if you've ever been to Pittsburgh, there are rivers everywhere, so you can't just walk home, most people. Luckily, I lived a few blocks away, and on my way home, I encountered a number of my professors who were also evacuating campus, and luckily, I was able to get in contact with other classmates and things, so we knew not to come to class that night. After the event, something that really sticks in my brain is that luckily one of my professors was good friends with Mr. Rogers. And so after the event, the next day we had a meeting with the library students, and Mr. Roger hosted it, and he talked about, the neighborhood concept and who's your neighbor, and it was a really, it's funny because no one would think of Mr. Rogers and 9/11 in the same breath, but when he started speaking about, who is your neighbor and all the hatred and vitriolic speech that came out of 9/11, and then you think of all the love that Mr. Rogers had, so it's a nice partnership in my brain.
That's beautiful. How did you see a difference in the patrons and the people you went to school with after the event, in the weeks after?
I was in library school at the time, and many of our classes were focused on service to children, and a lot of my classmates were school teachers. And so the school systems, you didn't have anything in place to react to something like this. And so, okay, what happened right afterwards? How would I react in another scenario if I were in front of a classroom reading to children, or if I had a first grade classroom, how would I explain what had happened to not convey my own fear without conveying a sense of immortality to my students as well? And so it generated a lot of discussions on service to children. How do you deal in a school setting with, okay, you're all going to go home. Why? We can't tell you. Is that creating more of a fear or helping the child out by letting their parents tell them?
Right.
So they also said a lot of them turned on PBS, and that whole day on PBS they were showing some sort of unrelated programming and didn't mention 9/11. And so as a news outlet, it was a very interesting place to speak on how news outlets worked and how even the internet worked at that time. Back in the dark ages.
I remember the dark ages. How has the 9/11 event, how did that change your outlook on life or the world? Or did it?
I think it definitely impacted the world and impacted the United States drastically, especially financially and economically, as well as culturally and socially. We were not as culturally aware of people in our society, I don't believe, before that point, nor were we especially adept at relating to them. And when you have a tragedy like that that impacts every race, every creed, every age, every American, we did unite together and try to figure out some solution to it. So I think it had an incredible impact socially and economically on our country.
Do you feel like it changed you?
I think every experience we have in life changes us, and so yes, I think it changed me. But it's on the same level as other important points in my life. I don't let it be the motivating point in my life, because what happened afterwards was much more important.